Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cybersecurity Recruiter podcast. Today, I'm joined by DeMeo. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing wonderful, Thomas. It's great to be here. Thank you. Been a longtime fan of your podcast. You are prolific in the industry, so honored to be here.
Oh, no, thanks, Ray. And it was one of those, when we were chatting last, it was like we didn't plan on doing a show, but then the more you were speaking about the industry and what you've been up to and investments and the VC world and the private equity world and the fact that I feel like the market is such a big and important talking point in a minute. It was like, the more you spoke, I was like, I've got to get this guy on the pod. So here we are. Cool. Ray, for the listeners that don't know you, you've been extremely busy over the years and done very well. I'm going to do you an intro. If I get any of this wrong, feel free to shout at me or correct me afterwards. But even as far back as early 2000s, late 90s, you were managing director of XULMX Corporation. You held VP levels around about that time as well. You were the executive director at Dell, and again held multiple very senior positions, VP of Global Operations, President and CEO of InnoPad. You've also been a venture advisor. You've also been the co-founder, CEO, COO, and SVP of Viasec Systems. You were there for almost a decade. You do various mentoring. You're a subcommittee member. You've been a chief growth officer, and you're currently the MD of Pulse Drive Group. So yeah, sounds like you've been busy over the years. Sounds like you've been doing pretty well. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here again. Thank you.
Cool. But I know I've done you a bit of an intro there, but I'll start, which I always start, which is, who are you? What do you get up to? What's a day in the life of Ray like these days?
Sure. So we do live in interesting times. You see it firsthand, the dynamics of the cybersecurity industry, what is happening, what is changing. For all of the either angst or transition, it's an exciting time, right? There is, and what keeps bringing me back, what brings many back is this. It's more than just networking. It's more than just financial. It's a passion about world-changing events that are tied to what we do. For me personally, but really for the vast majority of people I know in this business, it's hard. It's a hard business as well. So to come in and not have a purpose that's a higher principle, higher purpose beyond just closing deals. But I think we can, without overstating it, rightly say, yeah, the world is depending on how well this industry succeeds. You're a fan of Nicole Perlroth's recent book. They tell me this is how the world ends. Yeah, we've got a lot to do to help write that story.
Okay, cool. Our final question is normally, which book would you recommend to the listeners? So maybe you've already answered that one, or maybe you've got another. It sounds like it's worth a read. But yeah, you're right, Ray. Picking up on your point about you do have to have genuine passion for this, because I find it's harder to break into the normal industries. I think once people get to know you and they realize that your heart's in the right place, I think people are the most welcoming ever. But generally speaking, people are pretty professionally paranoid. I know from a recruitment perspective, as a recruiter, when you first start ringing people in the cybersecurity space, it's pretty tough going for the first kind of year or two. And then once people get to know, getting in, and you go from there. But right, like, you have to care and you have to actually be interested, because it's probably, I'm sure there is easier ways to make a living and make money. So you have to have a genuine passion, don't you?
Yes, you certainly do. At the end of the day, though, when we get out of bed, our feet hit the ground in the morning. It's nice to have a purpose. It's great when there's a challenge in front of you, and there's a lot of people depending on the outcome. I will say it that way.
Great. Go back to the market. So I know just before we hit record, and I know you're pretty plugged in when it comes to the private equity and the VC space, and we were briefly starting to talk about some stuff before we hit record there. What are folks in those circles saying at the minute about what the market's doing in security in general? Are they quite bullish, or are they playing it safe? Where do you think their head's at?
You know, it's interesting. There was a post by Kevin Skabinitz, who is now general partner at a VC firm called Tech Operators, but I had crossed paths with him when he was previously at IBM. And he posted just yesterday on all of the recent acquisitions in cyber AI. CrowdStrike recently bought Pangea, SentinelOne, Prompt Security, Palo Alto Networks, Protect AI, and on F5, Calypso AI. Every one of those is leveraging AI to reduce business risk. How do you protect AI applications? How do you prevent the data pool from getting corrupted? Versus this other promise of AI to improve operational efficiency, automating the SOC, for example. We know that's a problem. We know that there's an overwhelming avalanche of alerts. It's a huge human resource problem. As we look at exits, as we look at where money is going, we see this priority, at least near term, that if AI is going to go forward, we at least need to know that though corporations are saying, customers are saying, I need to know my investment is safe, that I'm not taking the whole corpus of my banking data or my healthcare data and putting it into an AI app that is going to be compromised or otherwise undermine the business. As far as where our dollar's going, it's interesting just to see that dynamic as it plays out in recent acquisitions. I was at an event last night, yet most all of yesterday, for here in Washington, D.C., the annual Data Tribe Cyber Innovation Event and Cyber Challenge. 5 companies pitched and ultimately a winner was chosen. But all of them were very consistent with this theme where how do we protect either AI applications or data in support of AI as this transition is being made? So an observation, a comment to or a response to your question there, if that's the direction you were thinking.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. You hit the nail on the head, Ray, because it's like you said before as well about how it is still exciting times. And I agree. I think for people that have been sat around cruising and maybe riding a hot market, I'm sure those people are pretty worried. But I think for the businesses like you've mentioned that are innovating and actually thinking about where the need is and thinking about where things are going, I think it's an exciting time for those businesses. And I think for individual folks, I think if you're on point and you're moving forward and you're keeping track of everything, because everything seems to be moving faster and faster, I think if you're in either of those two categories, I agree, and I think it is an exciting time. I know there's a lot of negativity out there at the minute, but I think there's still lots of fun to be had.
For sure. The Gartner Hype Cycle, we're all pretty familiar with that curve, that trough of disillusionment. It happens in any tech, new innovation in tech or new major trend. The observation that's consistent amongst all, whether you're an innovator yourself or an investor, is that it's just moving faster. So the hype has grown faster. Any trough of disillusionment or overselling of the promise, while it will inevitably happen in either some components or some corners of that, there's also a strong indicator that will come out of that trough quicker than, say, the advent of cloud or even back to the original advent of the internet. And the use cases keep growing. So I think that's a positive indicator. That's why as a young entrant to the tech world, yeah, it's an exciting time. You don't want to be, and we're seeing it in hiring, organizations are, I was having this conversation again last night, they're dialing back on that coders or the slang code monkeys, just because you're Python or Java, that's not sufficient anymore. If you're a few years in and you understand architecture, you know how to double click on, verify, validate what AI is spitting out in terms of if you're enlisting it to actually do code work, you're certainly in a better position. At the end of the day, you don't want to be the laborer displaced by the new invention of the tractor. You do want to be the person driving the tractor. And history has shown us over and over again that markets, people, humankind adapts. And going down that path.
What you've just said there, Ray, is exactly what we're seeing and I'm seeing when it comes to actually picking up new searches and new vacancies. Employers are 100% expecting people and folks to be able to do a lot more, because I think a little because of market conditions, but a little bit because they can do as well. We're seeing, and I've mentioned this before, but the CISO and the CIO position being merged into one. I've even seen CIO and chief of staff merged into one. Seen stuff like that again. But again, I think on the positive side, like there's a recruitment platform called Paraform, which I won't go into, but they make their money by supplying recruiters with clients, and they're all over my LinkedIn feed, all advertising all the time. Anyway, they do some good analysis on the market and where things are going. But they're saying that because individuals can do more and more by leveraging AI, they're foreseeing a scenario where instead of a good cybersecurity professional being on decent 6 figures, they're imagining a scenario where they're on 7 figures for an IC, for an individual contributor, because they can just do so much. But it will be a scenario where these people are like really sought after. It's the people that have really taken charge, really adapted, really learned, really kept up. But they're adamant that there's going to be a scenario where these security professionals are just going to be like football players.
We're seeing some of that, right? The fight between Google and Microsoft and some of the other big AI players. Crazy, right? Crazy numbers. But yeah, the world that keeps me busy, we all see it very much so in the commercial world, the defense side, the government side, which I've also had a leg in recent years. They see it, they know it's there. Everyone's recognizing the speed of this whole world. And then how do they take their habitual or legacy process for hiring, for building teams, or for adopting innovation? And how do they make that work in the new world? It's not like building a battleship over a couple of decades, whether it be identifying requirements, selecting vendors, doing evaluations, of course, doing integration and deployment. It all has to happen fast.
It does. But the government side will be interesting because not just the US governments all around the world, like you said, they notoriously move slow. So with things moving faster and the pace that governments like to move at, that'll be interesting to see how they adapt.
I'm at another event this week. It's a security conference, and it's based on the learnings from what is happening in Ukraine and how that affects security posture, both cyber and otherwise. And you even look at AI being used in conjunction with drone warfare. I'll know more after this event, but even from conversations to date. And a real conflict all of a sudden changes things pretty quick, and it changes priorities and process and procedure. The challenge is you don't really want to show up on the day and not be ready. And so that's a global problem. That there's geopolitical challenges, there's the pressure to be ready and modern and poised, and yet there's a lot of systems that definitely, procedural systems, procurement systems, adopt evaluation and adoption of innovations. Yeah, we'll see how fast we can get out of our own way.
Yeah, the drone technology is just fascinating and scary, isn't it? It's just unreal. What the Ukrainians, I think they're at the forefront of the drone tech, aren't they?
They certainly are. The work that they've done to innovate while they're literally being bombarded and the breakthroughs that they've had, that's a different kind of survival, right? That's dial it back and we talk about scrappy startups. That changes the whole definition, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You're scrappy, you're not there. And so here we are. And I think more people are trying to learn from that. It remains to be seen.
Cool. Right. Over the years, and when we released this episode, it's okay with you, my friend, I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes so people can have a look. But you've done so much over the years and you've had so much progression, held some really senior positions, and then not only held senior positions, but progressed quite well while you spent time at companies. What do you know now that you maybe wish you knew 5-10 years ago? Or is there anything that's enabled you to progress where maybe others haven't? Like any secrets you can give away, my friend?
Yeah, of course, the story is always better in the telling, right? Along the way, you're clawing your way up that muddy hillside in one form or another, right? And we can package nice outcome after the fact. Look, I grew up one of 7 kids, right? You learn in those environments to fight for your own food, so to speak. But it's always competition for resources in a good way. We're fortunate, all very close. But you learn to go out very young, earn your own way, pay for your own schooling, or pay for whatever it was. I hear a quick story. I wanted to go to summer camp as a kid, and I said to my folks, hey, could you send me to summer camp? They're like, no, we don't have the money for that. Here's what you can do. There's a country club, a golf course down the road. You can caddy. You can carry a bag and they'll pay you money to do it. And it's like summer camp. And you know what? Actually, it was outdoors. It was good exercise. But very early on, learn this value of, and this is like at age 13. One of my brothers started at age 11. You're out. Here's engagement with a client. Here's engagement with someone. If you do a good job, you get paid well. And if you don't get a tip or you don't get asked to come back. And so that's, from a very early age, that was built into my working DNA. And then other elements of this, I started out in the very early instance, I started out as an engineer and I got sent out into a customer environment. You're in a lab, you're designing something, you're in a room and thinking about whiteboarding how something might work or should work. And you're envisioning how a customer would use it. I got sent out into the field. This was digital control systems for airplanes. And I'm like, hey, wait a second. I come back in several weeks later. Do you know what's really going on in the field? Do you understand how it's being used? Do you understand the problems they're having and how urgent this is? people are back in their internal organizational, here's the process, here's all. And so what I took away from that is this level of appreciation for that customer end user environment, that customer pain if things aren't being delivered in the right way, and a sense of urgency in making sure that recipe gets handled right. And I've taken that with me. So that's like in big organizational environment. You come into these smaller environments, some will say, you can edit this out later if it's too much of a tangent, but indulge me. Some will say, oh, I love the startup environment because you can sit at a coffee shop and sketch it out on the back of a napkin and run a business that way, and people will give you money. And really, what I've learned is it's absolutely the opposite of that. You can be successful in smaller businesses if you do have discipline, if you do have process built in your work ethic and your planning. It's the only way, because otherwise you waste too much time, you waste too much money, and you fall off that inevitable cliff if you don't deliver soon enough and with the right solution at the right time. So there's that requirement. And I feel fortunate that I learned that both in terms of the need for fire and energy and early on, but then also this need to have a mental self-discipline, invoke it, to turn that into your organization. It starts with an idea, then you build a team that has to your mission in the world. How do you bring the right people on that will share that vision? How do you get that to coalesce? And then move the whole thing forward. So those are points of pride. There's some lessons learned along the way where that doesn't go quite right. And you're like, oh, okay, I've got to fix that.
There is good. I've heard it described, it's like when a plane takes off, like to get something off that, you just mentioned like fire, hunger there, but to get the thing off the ground in the first place, the business, it just takes, the process and organization, but it just takes such a big amount of discipline and commitment and just consistency. And it's the biggest self-discovery journey ever, isn't it? It's stressful, but it's amazing.
So there's a bunch of airplane analogies we could use along the way here. Actually, I'll go with your theme, right? Sure, it's an amazing high, right? It's amazing high when you have a vision, it's you and your partners in the very formative days, and you turn that into a presentation, and you're making hundreds of presentations to investors. You're learning to absorb rejection. You're learning to recalibrate, refine. You're talking to customers, you're talking to investors, and then finally you get that initial seed money or initial round of funding. It's a very big adrenaline rush. And so while some might say, hey, you got acquired, that's exciting, why not stick with the big company? Some do, but for most, it's like, can't do it. You want to go back, and it's like that runner's high, I think, for athletes. Along those lines, impressing a customer for the first time, winning a first contract is exciting. Demonstrating, proving an industry technical breakthrough. Every one of those is opportunities for more energy, more commitment. Of course, the opportunity to bring more people into the organization.
Yeah, it goes right back to what you said right at the start of this episode, which was when you get out of bed and your feet hit the ground in the morning, like having that ultimate sense of purpose. And that's what you're describing there. You get acquired, it's great, you do this, you do that, you have that success, but then it's the same thing that got you to that point in the first place. Is the same thing. It's that kind of feeling of moving forward. That's the real juice.
By all means. What happened was I didn't know what I was doing when I got into my first startup. I got hired into a startup that was maybe 50 people. And then it grew to a bit over 100 and it got acquired. But then I'm moved into this job. I'm like, oh yeah, it's a job. It'll be around as long as I want it. Reid Hoffman, right? LinkedIn. It's a box of airplane parts, and you're jumping off a cliff. That's his famous quote on that. You've got to build the airplane before you hit the ground so you can fly away, right? Safely fly away. But once that happened, and that was like a 650 million. Whoa, okay, that's very cool. And the speed with which it happens and the ability to work, you see your contribution instantly reflected across the organization. That's another dimension, right? Which is very exciting for some. Others might not like it. But if you're so inclined, it's very exciting. So crazy. Pulled into that space.
Yeah, I think you need to be a bit crazy, but in a good way.
By all means. But now bring it back 100%. And you're a soldier or leader of a small team of soldiers and doing the work you do in this big industry. So I would imagine you can relate.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's interesting here when you talk about the golf caddy stuff and how it taught you some key skills at an early age. And I'm seeing this sort of pattern emerge across various different episodes with people that have progressed and done really well. I've heard people like starting off in like hospitality and having to deal with lots of people and deal with lots of personalities. You've mentioned the golfing, and like the golfing especially.
I think I was 13 at that time.
That's happening at such an early age. So you're so impressionable at that age. So you're picking up these skills and probably not even really realizing at the time, but it's those skills. And then you're talking about customers, and I can see a massive difference when I'm speaking to people. You can tell the people that have been client facing, they're used to dealing with customers, they're used to working on a consulting or an advisory basis. The difference between those type of people and the people that have just been internal, dealing with internals, is like chalk and cheese. It's massive difference. And these are the skills you're talking about. I think having that skill set is just so valuable, but getting access to something like what you did at that age, or if you've been in hospitality from a young age, I think those types of things help.
Yeah, we were all little kids, and we would see these, it's a private country club, we would see these golfers coming down in the morning, and everyone would compete to get, because you knew who the best golf was. So it's so much better to be caddying for someone who's right down the middle of the fairway than someone who's off in the weeds and the woods and in the park. And the best ones were always the best tippers as well. It's crazy. I can remember looking up, but there was this ramp they would walk down and you would get assigned, and we think, those guys, they're like not quite godlike, but you were like, whoa, that's really impressive. Those guys are amazing. They like on a whole nother plane of human. Actually, they're all very well-to-do people. Now here we are, my two brothers who came up with me, and that they're now both members of that same club. So they both very successful in their own right. But yeah, I think to your point, it gets into your psyche and your behavior and your patterns.
I used to play quite a bit of golf, Ray. Then I stopped and I've just started again. But I can hit it miles, but I've got no idea where it's going. So it sounds like if anyone was to caddy for me at the minute, it would be an absolute nightmare, because I don't know whether it's going left, right, or I don't know where it's going.
I saw your video clip. I saw you at the driving range, which was cool.
Oh, Ray, those skills that you're talking about, those skills to be able to deal with customers and handle situation, and that ability to go through what you've been on those startups, like you mentioned, it always sounds better when you're telling the story back. And it does sound great, like those big exits and coming in as really early stage and then getting acquired, but I'm sure it was really stressful along the way. But if I'm listening and I haven't got those skills to be able to deal with people that you picked up at a young age when you were caddying, if I'm listening but I haven't got them, but I want to get them, is there anything that I could do to refine that skill set or acquire those skills? Anything on there for the listeners?
I think you have to consciously put yourself into difficult adversarial positions. It's that birth by fire. Sometimes it happens to either your upbringing, your growing up, the circumstances you just happen to find yourself in. Not everyone is ready. There are others who say, you know what, I've got a mortgage, I've got 2.5 kids and a Cocker Spaniel, and I have to feed them all, and maybe I'll just ride it out and contribute toward a pension. Statistically, that's not wrong. It's because statistically you might do as well, but at the end of the day, are you going back to your feet hitting the ground in the morning? You're going to see what you can do on your own in a more challenging environment. But more specifically to the question, yeah, if you're ready to take that jump, then take the skills that you've honed already. There's a lot gained in working for a larger organization early on. Again, in terms of process, in terms of team and organization and program management, budget planning. It's just that it all moves so slow, and there's so many layers that are typically not conducive to real innovation. But there's a lot to be taken from that early environment. In fact, I would suggest if you're a youngster, say you're coming out of school, I would in fact actually recommend working for a bigger organization for the first 3 or 4 years. Do that and make it your entire mission. Okay, so doubling down on your question, make it your mission to find mentors. Go into that, inside that big organization, find people who you admire, who will coach you. Figure out every skill that you think you're going to need in your future life if you're going to start your own business or become part of a smaller one, and suck their brains for that knowledge and for any lessons you can take from it, and then put those to work in the next phase.
Yeah, no, Devin. And I think as well, Ray, you're basically getting paid to learn there as well. If you go to another organization, you can probably look at what they do really. You probably learn on both sides. You can probably learn what not to do and what they do, the mistakes they made, and that's a big learning. You can learn what they do really well as well. And all the time, you're doing on someone else's watch and you're getting paid to do so. It's not all bad.
By all means. It's almost a disservice to come straight out of school, my personal opinion. You come straight out of school, you're given a bunch of money to go build a company. There's a lot of foundational things that you don't know, how to budget effectively, how to hire well, how to build a schedule, execute contracts, pricing, all of those dimensions and elements, those take time to learn. So there are people like Michael Dell he was very successful on his own, and people said, we have to surround this young man with senior talent to make him successful. That's amazing. That's great. And that worked out really well. But oftentimes it doesn't go that way.
Yeah, I think as well, Ray, like those critical thinking skills, like the more people I speak to, I don't even think you can really teach them. It's just that you just develop them over time. And you need to have, like you said, you need to have been in organizations, seen things. You just need to have experience, I think, a lot of the time. And those critical thinking skills are valuable. If you're starting your own business, they're valuable. But if you're working for an organization, especially if they're a remote organization and they're growing pretty quickly, they need people with those sharp critical thinking skills. Otherwise, the wheels just fall off. But yeah, I'm not convinced you can teach them. You just need to develop them over time.
Sometimes there's the hard lessons too, right? If there's anything I've taken away, it's respect for people. Respect for talent, respect for the commitment that they give to you in your business, the passion commitment they give to you in your business. I was asked to by an investment group that I had known and worked with. They said, could you help us with this turnaround situation? However, it was a company that I show up on the first day and there's no cash in the bank. And I had the very difficult job of cutting 100 plus people. And they're all feeding their families. There was the technology side, and then there was a manufacturing side. A lot of people, they're immigrants or they're people that are working for lower wage, and that hits hard. I was able to ultimately raise money and bring them all back, and very equally overwhelmed by the appreciation shown. A boss of mine long ago said, if it ever gets to the point where laying someone off, cutting people, you become indifferent to it. Or if you ever get to the point where it doesn't hurt, it's time to get out of the business. You should go find a different job to do. And he's so right about that.
Yeah.
So those elements as well. Another really important lesson to me is to never be cavalier with the livelihood of other people.
Yeah. Do you know what? I'll tell you what they're like. I think that's always been a bit of a dream of mine when it has to go in somewhere and turn something. I bet that is like hell of a feeling to be parachuted in, go in there, turn it right. I bet that was fun.
I'm there on the day, and this guy shows up, and he's got a clipboard, and he's walking around, and he's counting up desks. And I go, what are you doing? Why are you here? He goes, my job is to liquidate. What do you mean liquidate? I just started. This is plan B. And I was like, no, go away. There, in your face and imminent. And so there is that side of it.
What, in terms of in the security space, investment space, market, what are you seeing out there that you think could be helpful to me, you and the listeners?
Short anecdote story. As mentioned, I started out doing digital control systems in aerospace. And then, that it's funny how the wheel comes full circle, and everyone is so concerned about critical infrastructure, cyber-physical systems. How do those get protected? And then there's this dimension, right? You were talking about Black Hat Conference, I believe, in one of your earlier podcasts. Certainly hope you come to a future event. You should, by all means, try to do so. Takeaway is 75% of the companies in this past year that were on display at both Black Hat and RSA, they're protecting systems post-deployment, right? How do we catch someone intruding into a system? Granted, some of those systems could be misconfigured, and granted, some of those systems are compromised because of bad human behavior or bad human practice. But there's a huge component, a massive component, where software is vulnerable at the time that it is sold to the customer. There's been a big call to action in recent years, I think globally, certainly stateside, on this need to make the code more secure before it's deployed. So 75% looking at code post-deployment, and 25% saying, how can we build code more secure before it ever gets sold to the customers? So if you look at this $350 billion market, 3/4 of that is spent because a very large percentage of that number is being spent because of the code hygiene beforehand. And just to take it back and why this resonates with me, I got sent out my early 20s to a aircraft facility in northern Italy. A plane that we had systems on had crashed. The pilot safely ejected, but they send me out with bunch of diagnostic gear to figure out whether or not we had any relation to what was going on or would cause that crash. So I take the system apart. There's a whole contingent of, I'm on a flight line, this plane's taking off, there's a bench off to the side, take it apart, put it back together again, and we had concluded, no, it must be something else. But this goes back to process and hygiene, and what's drummed into your head very early on is nothing ever gets put back into production. Nothing ever gets to fly again until it goes through 5 levels of inspection. Every inspection step is based on equipment that is fully calibrated. And there's a signature every step of the way. There's certifications. Every person that signs off in turn has training and certification behind it. These are all steps that have, on the software side, these are all steps that have largely been skipped. And it's in the interest of speed. It's the interest of getting code deployed more quickly and cheaply. So we're here, and if I put this digital control system back together, and it's got a number of adjustments, they say, hey, Ray, we just want to test this out on the engine. It's like, you don't have a proper test facility. It has to go back to my facility, and then we'll send you a new one. They're like, no, what we'll do is we just bolt it back on the airplane. As no, you can't do that because it can't fly. They're like, no, you have to understand, we'll just bolt it there, and they take this big, giant steel chain, and they chain it down to the tarmac. So we're out on the flight line, and we're just going to see how it feels. We just want to get the feeling of it. So they do, and we're all out there with clipboards, and the guy in the cockpit who's checking out the engine, he gives it the thumbs up, and he's, yeah, it seems like it's okay. But still, at that point, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to shut down and then ship it back. What do you think they did instead? The next thing you know, I turn around because I'm talking to the group on my side, and he's disconnected that chain, and it's all right there. You're in front of the hangar. There's the runway, and he is already halfway down the runway, and then he's up in the air, and I'm in total panic. This is just not allowed. It's not right. They're like, it's experimental. And it was fine. He came back and he landed, but it was such a major departure from protocol and process. And if you think about it, the reason very few of us ever think twice about getting on an airplane, I think there were 3 billion air miles flown in the U.S. without a fatality in 2023. As an example, and worldwide more than that, it's because this process and integrity is put in place. The vast majority of vulnerabilities and ultimately billions of dollars in compromise happen because we skip this whole thing, right? We're primal creatures. We all grew up with this, I think, DNA programming of fearing to fall out of a tree, and from generations of when we may have been primates. And so we're like, no, I'm not going to go up in that plane. I don't care if you give me a discount flight or at a preferred time. If it's not inspected and if it's not designed right, I don't want to be there. But fast forward today, this is the huge gap. Can AI help us design code more securely? Hopefully. Can AI better manage SOCs to field and triage and handle alerts better? Hopefully we're able to catch up. Otherwise, the problem is just so massively large. Humans alone, unless you completely clean the slate and start over again, which we're not about to do, it's a big problem to solve.
Yeah. Right. With AI could help, but AI could also be making it worse, couldn't it, by deploying just more bad code, couldn't it?
It certainly could. We're not there yet. So back to the organizations you contract with and the people you're hiring, yeah, by all means. Anyone in those development roles has to be at a level where they can second guess, they can evaluate, they can confirm that AI generated code is in fact valid to move to production, move on to the next level of its process. Yeah. So that's a skill set that we will absolutely need more of.
Yeah. It sounds like on some interesting days though, Ray. That particular day sounds like it didn't do things by the book, but it sounds like it was pretty stimulating.
It points out, Thomas, it's this. We have solved this kind of problem before. It comes down to human will and coordination. Same thing with nuclear power plants. They run for decades, and there are very few incidents in view of how long they've run. And it's because of that level of integrity and that safety critical of life mindset that's behind it. Is every organization going to totally blow up and die? They use bad code? Not necessarily, but the knock-on effect, it's cumulative, right? It just builds, and we see. If you look at the ransomware dollars, if you look at the cost of pipelines or power line facilities being taken offline, it's a big
Cool. All right. And thanks for that, by the way, mate. Yeah, like I say, it sounds like you've been having some fun. As we come to the end here, the final question I always ask, I basically ask which book, and it could be security related, but it doesn't have to be, just which book has had the most positive impact on you that could help the listeners, or what book has made you the best version of yourself? It could be book, it could be podcast, it could be online content. Just anything you've consumed that could help others.
So it's absolutely worth, whether you're in cybersecurity or not, it's absolutely worth reading that book I mentioned in the beginning. They Tell Me This Is How the World Ends. It's about the arms trade, really. It's about the weapons trade, but those weapons are cyber weapons. It's about all nation states, allies or not, who are looking for ways that they could hack into another nation's or organizations or individuals' code and then not tell anyone about it, because if you know about it and no one else does. But read the book. It's fascinating, very well researched. I heard Stanley McChrystal's book, Team of Teams, mentioned by one of your other conversations recently.
Okay.
Yeah, love that book. That's fantastic. Everything to do with this, especially if you're going to go into this tech world or this early stage, even mid-stage business world, everything to do with mental toughness, resilience. You could pick any number of sports-themed books. Vince Lombardi was always known for quoting Marcus Aurelius. But it comes down to, if you can control your mind, you can't really control events. You can control your mind and you can ultimately determine outcomes. And so I guess that's my first thought. The book that was mentioned, a book I haven't read, but I want to, is called Born Standing Up. It came out maybe a decade ago by the comedian Steve Martin. And so it was actually mentioned at this conference yesterday, right? And it's about, one of the quotes was, be so good that you can't be ignored. Be so good that you're the only game in town. And there's some life lessons there that I think are consistent with the other themes of our conversations. I'm going to read that.
Cool. I've enjoyed it, my friend. Have you got a bit more time in DC, or are you living elsewhere, or you got some more meetings in DC?
So I'm here today and tomorrow. And then, yeah, just on me. So I get, inevitably, the way my world works, it's your network, right? Your network is your value, is your worth. So I just recently finished helping transition a private equity-owned cyber company across product and go-to-market and pipeline strategy, which is great. My first experience doing that in the private equity world as well. What I get asked to do is to advise or to be a strategic advisor or operating partner, usually with an investment group. And then that's like the first couple conversations. And then more often than not, at least my experience to date has been, hey, would you consider putting more time in, or would you do it full time? And so getting the recipe right, understanding the mission, the passion, the team, the offering, the potential outcome is part of what I do as a matter of course. It's what I'm doing now. So stay tuned, but that's what keeps me going day to day.
Good. That last project sounds really exciting. That sounds good.
Yeah, but then you get into these conversations, especially if it's on the defense or security side, and it's like, hey, my name's Ray. What's your name? My name's John. What's his name? His name's Mike. What do you guys do? We're just here for this meeting. But as far as building intimacy, that's a whole different level of gameplay. Cool. So those are interesting too.
Cool. No, Ray, thanks, mate. I know you're a busy man, so I appreciate you taking the time. And genuinely, mate, I've really enjoyed it, mate. There's been some good bits of information in here. It's been nice. But yeah, thanks again, mate. Do you think we did a good job? Do you think we did okay?
It's a joy talking to you. It's a great conversation. It's like we're in a pub together.
Yeah.
Totally appreciate that. Also, to the extent that I can be helpful to you and what you're trying to accomplish with your business, let me know. I have an understanding so far, but I'll keep my eyes open, of course, as well, and glad to see if there's any way what I do and what you do is helpful to your business.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks again, mate. Really enjoyed that, buddy.
Pleasure. Okay. All good. Enjoy the rest of your evening.